дизель двигуна, важкий кевларний гір, він душу опіка, атаку сухопутні, ідуть війська! Підходайте, вони безстрашні, піхота рве, ворожу пащу, вимаєм ті, міцніше сталі, віддати честь нашій державі. Війська ідуть, летять снаряди, небесний гір, несуть армади, війська землі, міцніше сталі, за нами мир, і честь держави.
Із Америки приїхав наш надійний побратим, познайомтеся із ним.
Хай Марс!
В росіян зі сраки дим.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
За ракетою ракету на паскудних ворогів випускає весь наш гнів.
Хай Марс!
Робить все без зайвих слів.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Московити зі снарядами гребуться на складах, коли робить свій бабах.
Хай Марс!
Наганяє лютий страх.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Розробляють окупанти свої плани у штабах, але чутне знов бабах.
Хай Марс!
Лупить нечисть по зубах.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Окупанти лиш заповнили склади своїм пальним, як вітається із ним.
Хай Марс!
Підіймає чорний дим.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Не любити московитів і довести нелюбов помагає знов і знов.
Хай Марс!
Найточніший орколов.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Хай Марс!
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, та вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt. Welcome back to day 172 of the news, and it is another Sunday night of fundraising for Ukraine.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And I have to say, we've got some pretty good stuff tonight. Not only have we seen a large amount of Russian casualties, both in terms of vehicles and manpower being inflicted by the Ukrainians on the front lines today, but we've also been able to get an official report from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense outlining where offensives are occurring right now in the areas that Ukraine does control, according to the MOD. Also, we have a couple of clips from inside Russia today showing some Russians seething. Y'all know what I mean when we get to it. But with that, I would like to make a quick note, not to filibuster or anything, but we do have a little bit of a special thing going on tonight. It is, of course, the Sunday Fundraiser. And just in case, if y'all didn't know, tonight is actually a pretty big one. Let me pull out the piece of paper here to tell everyone how much we have raised as a channel so far as the Lee Spring Army in support of Ukraine. The total is $391,747. Over the course of tonight's fundraiser, we may have the chance, and we may actually be able to pass the $400,000 mark in support raised for Ukraine. And tonight's fundraiser is one that we've done twice before, and I believe is an incredible organization, which is Razom for Ukraine. Razom for Ukraine is an organization that has been helping out Ukrainian veterans to pay for their college and among many other benefits. They're an incredible organization. I've heard a lot of good things about them, and I would love if y'all all made sure to support them tonight, as this fundraiser directly helps out Ukrainian soldiers who are fighting in this war and help them to have a life beyond the military, which is something they full and well deserve, considering that they will be the reason Ukraine exists into the next year and the decades and centuries beyond. So, with that, once again, I highly recommend y'all support. We have currently raised $966. I've already put in $100 of my own money, and I ask that y'all help me to get to that $5,000 goal, and maybe even get to $400,000 total raised amongst all of our fundraisers. So with that, we are now going to be moving on into our first bits of news to start off tonight on an incredibly high note, because it appears that the damage that is kind of being inflicted on Russia from both Ukraine and the economic sanctions of the West are starting to have a bit of an adverse effect on everyone in Russia. As we can see here in St. Petersburg, there's a Russian that is a little angry about the things that have been going on with Estonia revoking Russians' visas. So let's look at what he's got to say, because he's not happy at all. Some would say he's a little angry.
А прибалтам, которые хотят исказить историю, я желаю смерти. У нас Искандеры стоят, они уничтожат всю Прибалтику, они уничтожат Таллин, они уничтожат Ригу, они уничтожат Вильнюс, все, Варшаву. Будет катастрофа. Если они будут продолжать эту вакханалию, то мы их уничтожим. Киев уничтожим. Уничтожим Бухарест, Варшаву, эту самую Бухарест. Уничтожим Будапешт. Мы их всех уничтожим. Прагу уничтожим. Все будут на коленях стоять, если они не покаятся.
I'd have to say the guy's a little angry. And it's honestly really funny to see how angry this guy is. And the only thing I can say in response to this guy's entire rant in this video is, dude, chill. You can't even defeat the Ukrainians, which are pretty much standing on their own right now with a little bit of Western support. How in the world do you actually expect to take on the entirety of the West when you can't even deal with Ukraine? That's something that was always on my mind whenever Russians are having a power trip in their heads, because this just doesn't pan out into reality. But this guy was reaching the maximum of his vocal cords tonight, trying to show how angry he is. And we can see that apparently the effects and the pain of this war is actually starting to be felt amongst the common Russian public. And also, one thing that I found funny, just for those of y'all who are listening to the background, is how there's soothing, like, jazz background music being played while this guy is having a complete psychotic breakdown on screen. So let's just watch about 5 seconds of that again. It's like Disneyland back there, and this guy is just going off. So, without going through the whole video again, a pretty funny one to see, but we have something to top it even better. We have seen a Russian in their natural habitat. Not only a Russian in their natural habitat, but a Russian that is Slav squatting. And if y'all know anything about Slavic culture, this is the way to sit in Russia. You can see him right here, both feet plainly on the ground, flat surface. In the West, you know, whenever we squat, we usually keep our heels off the ground. But in most Eastern European and Slavic countries, they have kind of had a different way of squatting when they sit, which is putting their feet flat onto the ground. And we can see this Russian clearly exhibiting the perfect Slav squat. Anyways, I'm going to let y'all see this video. There is a speech to text at the bottom, and it kind of gives you an idea of another seething Russian, I guess you could say. So, without further ado, let's check this out.
Какую войну?
С Украиной.
Да какой с Украины?
С нациками, ты понимаешь, с нациками. С фашистами, сука, ебаными! Бля, буду с фашистами!
I can just imagine. I'm actually going to have to maybe go back and read this over again because it looks like some of the captions may be cut off for y'all. I can see them, but unfortunately y'all can't. But for some reason, I feel like Steve Irwin in this situation would be a perfect match. Like, oi, we found a random Russian sitting in the side of this field. They're not too dangerous, but let's go up and say Ukraine to him and let's see if we can get him pissed off. And it looks like they've done an excellent job because this guy is going insane.
Пидорасы! Твари ебаные! Я вас рвал на части! Суки! Суки! Я! Чикаго! Генерал!
Мужик, ты, я говорю, нахера ты мне стекло-то разбил?
Ушел отсюда. Уехал!
Now he's lost it. He's going Super Saiyan mode.
Oh my god. He's going wild. What
He went
happened?
insane. Okay, so now to reread this real quick, I'm going to read y'all the captions, and then we're going to go back to the very end and analyze what exactly happened. So let me mute this so that way I can make sure to read it off well. So let's begin. Russia says, I need to go to war. What war? With Ukraine. What Ukraine? You, with the Nazis. You understand? With the Nazis. With the fascist effing bitch. I'll be fighting with the Nazis. Mother effers. Effing creatures. I tore you apart. Suki. Suki. I am the general. This guy is pulling a straight up Captain Phillips. He's literally going, I am the captain. I am the captain. Man, you broke my window with your yelling, and then he shows the broken windshield, which is actually a really good comeback to all that. And then this guy out there sitting on the ground, he says, leave, blядь, leave, and then he starts kicking the car.
That guy is nuts.
He has absolutely lost it. So for those of y'all who do not know, this is what some of our viewers do whenever I get historical facts wrong, is that they want to do this. But anyways, let's go back real quick and let's listen to those last few seconds of raw rage from this Russian, and let's break down the noises that we hear.
Уехал! Уехал, блядь!
So we can hear him slamming his foot into the car the first time, but notice that the second time, apparently he stubbed his toe because you hear some kind of sound when he kicks it.
Уехал!
Oh man, I wish Matthew could hear the audio because this sound is memorable.
Уехал!
Oh my lord, this man is causing himself physical pain over something that really doesn't affect him all too much. This guy driving around in a car just saying the word, he literally just said the word Ukraine, and it coming out of this guy's mouth was enough for this Russian to literally lose it. So with that is the end of this video. Once again, another hilarious one, and it is showing that apparently the morale amongst the Russian citizenry is just not as high as it was in, say, Ukraine. So with that, we're now moving on from this video, and also, just a quick note, if y'all would like to go back and watch these videos for your own entertainment factors and laughs, we do have a link to this map in the description below. I'll show y'all that real quick. So if we go to YouTube, because, you know, just in case there's some new people here who don't know, you go to YouTube, you click on the stream, and we mute it. We'll pause it, really, just for the reasons of the stream. And here in the video description is the map. You can click on this link right here. All you have to do is left click, and it brings you straight to this map. You can click on every single little button. I'm clicking on, like the one right there that shows this video, just in case if y'all never seen that before. Just want to let y'all know. Also, look at that figure on the fundraiser. Is that nice or what? And we'll be covering that, of course, in our question segment, which will be coming up in a pretty good while, actually. But with that, we're now moving on from this video and into our next segment of entertainment, where we can see a baby carriage competition in Russia. The Russians find reasons to glorify this war any way they can, and I think at this point it's a coping mechanism, because we can see the average Russian is apparently not having a lot of fun anymore based off of the 2 videos we've seen, but they're still doing things to try and show their support for the war. For example, making this baby carriage into a Z tank. Kind of interesting. I have not seen a red star on a single Russian tank in this entire war. We've seen a guards roundel, and we've also seen the victory banners and 1 Soviet flag, but I have never just seen a straight-up red star. And so the Russians, in their propaganda, they still think it's World War II. We can also see Sol Russie, which means like for Russia, on the barrel of this baby carriage. And I've got to say, some pretty weird and kind of messed up stuff with how they glorify this war to this degree. And I think if the Russian public, well, then again, that's not entirely true, because I was going to say if the Russian public knew the atrocities that the Russians were committing in Ukraine, maybe they would feel different, but we already know that's not necessarily true. The Russian state TV glorifies the pretty much war crimes that they perpetrate in Ukraine, and a lot of times we see the Russian public, like the last seething angry guy and the other one, pretty much declaring that they want to kill innocent civilians all over the world just for the sake of it, really. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of Russia, and from the hilarity that we saw today in those 2 videos, I hope y'all enjoyed those a lot, because I had a lot of entertainment watching them the first time, before the news, and on the news as well. So with that, we're now going to be moving around to a little bit of the miscellaneous news we have left, which is really just over here in Uzhhorod near Slovakia, where we have heard the confirmed news, along with picture evidence to back it up, that the Zuzana SPGs have arrived in Ukraine. Slovakia pledged to send 4 of these, and we can see 2 of them right here. Once again, really cool looking, wow, voice crack right there, sorry about that, but really cool looking SPGs. They're very similar to the Dana in how the turret is set up on it, so pretty neat overall. They do have a pretty decent range as well, around 25 miles, which is actually far further than the M777 can fire. And honestly, I'm very impressed that the Slovaks would give up equipment like this. If you look at the Slovakian army and the size of it, it's incredibly small, and so sending over 4 SPGs like these Zuzanas is a big deal for Slovakia. For a country like the United States, considering we have pretty much thousands of everything, artillery systems, aircraft, whatever you want to send to Ukraine, it's not really a big deal for us to send, say, 4 SPGs or even 90 M777s. But for a country like Slovakia, this is huge, and it shows how dedicated they are to supporting Ukraine and helping them to continue the fight in this war. Now, covering the last bit of miscellaneous news we have that isn't really attached to your front line, let's move into our location unknowns. And we're starting off our location unknowns today with something pretty funny. Y'all may remember the old Roman phrase, Vini Vidi Vici, which means I came, I saw, I conquered. Apparently the Russians have emphasized and kind of evolved this statement to become I came, I saw, I got shot. I like how I said I cam in the caption right there, but still, it's the thought that counts. So let's check out this video and see what this Russian tank did. So I'm going to have to mute it because there's copyrighted music, but we can see this Russian tank moving through the area, and is that what I think it is? That looks a lot, if I was on the misconception, that looks a lot like a T-62. I can't really tell you for certain because it is kind of hard to see it. Wait a minute, no, that might be something else. It might be like a T-80. But we can see it get hit by an AT, and it looks like the crew's bailed. The tank's done for. Now we can see the drone looking at it a little bit better, and now we see what it is, and it appears to be a T-80BV. So another somewhat dated Russian tank knocked out, but I love how it shot like 1 or 2 shots, turned around and tried to run away, and then it just ended up getting the engine bay blown out, and the crew bailed out and left it. Another $3.5 million main battle tank destroyed, and I've just got to say, isn't it great to see this kind of stuff? I know that war is a pretty bad thing, but you have to root for one side, and when you root for a side, you're pretty much saying that there will be casualties on the other. And knowing that Ukraine is continuing to defend their land, push the Russians back, and make them pay for these incursions is great to see. And I hope that we continue to see these kinds of losses inflicted on the Russians in the coming weeks, because I can guarantee you we saw a lot of this today as we move on through this news. And so with that, we're on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can then see a drone attack. Now, this one This one I'm going to have to cut off here about when the drone bomblet lands, because I'm not really sure if the rest of it is YouTube appropriate, but of course y'all can click on the link in the description below and check this video out yourselves. But we can see the Russians wandering around here, and we can see a Russian running in with... I would love to show y'all what happens after this part right here, but pretty much we're going to have to get off of that real quick. The guy was running in with a whole bunch of loot, because once he fell out onto the ground, all of the stuff that was in his arms went falling onto the ground as well, and we saw a frying pan and a couple of other, like, household utensils and items that he just stole out of a house and was running back to this one with, for them to use. It looks like in the video, it doesn't seem that they will be cooking much of anything, but then again, I can't really show y'all because of reasons, you know, YouTube and all. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, and this isn't really news, but I saw someone actually have great attention to detail, because y'all may remember this little picture that I showed y'all a while ago of Medvedev looking through his binoculars, and Matthew, can you remind everyone what was so stupid about this picture?
To be honest with you, I can't remember right off the bat.
The binocular flaps, they're over the lenses.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And so we were sitting there and marveling at the stupidity of taking a picture like this, because he obviously can't see anything. And someone made a meme, and they didn't make any meme that was just low end and low quality. They paid attention to the details. And so we're going to click on this, and I'm going to let y'all see this little meme real quick, because beyond the music, which I can't play, I want y'all to note this, because I'm not going to show the whole meme, but notice how they made the binocular flaps an actual thing in the binocular view. They cut it out so that way it would look like what Medvedev would probably be seeing, although that's even a stretch, because it looks like the flap covers the entire lens. Still, a pretty funny little meme, and I love to know that the people who are making jokes at the Russians' expense are paying good attention to the stupidity of Russian propaganda at times, like we saw there. Moving on to even our next bit of Location Unknown news, we can see that the Ukrainians, of course, are improvising new, and not necessarily better weapons. I'm not really sure if this thing would be effective or not, but they are making new weapons to help fill the gaps of some of the areas they have on the front lines in terms of equipment. Here we can see a Ukrainian truck that's been rigged up to have a single MLRS tube on it that apparently fires a 120mm rocket. Apparently, according to the caption, it says 3-tube, but I didn't really see it in the first part of the video. There may be 3 tubes. But it is interesting to see that the Ukrainians, whenever running short on equipment, they start to improvise a whole lot. I mean, like, an unbelievable amount. And this is one of the cooler improvisations they've made, but still, in my mind, the best one they've ever done was the 100mm gun put onto an MTLB. But here's the video of this little 122mm MLRS firing.
Це вам орки погані за Вінницю. Огонь. Давай.
Pretty crazy to see. That's the end of the video, of course, and it's always cool to see the kind of stuff that the Ukrainians cobble together to keep holding the Russians back. And what's impressive, because I know that someone's about to say, "Oh, if the Russians did that, you wouldn't have said anything good about it." There's a difference. The largest difference in between Russia and Ukraine is that Ukraine really didn't have a military budget before this war, and the Russians had around 60 to 70 billion as a military budget, and also claimed themselves to be an unstoppable world superpower militarily. So whenever I see the Russians doing something like that, or making ghetto bombs or anything like that, I'm like, well, look at that. Isn't that just cheap and pathetic of a country that claimed to be a superpower? But when the Ukrainians do it, it's of course really fun and interesting to see, because you're like, wow, not only are they the underdogs, they're holding the Russians back, and they're still coming up with crazy stuff to use in this war to keep on winning, pretty much, and holding the Russians where they are. And so with that, that's the end of that little video, and once again, pretty cool to see. So, we're moving on to our second to last little clip of Location Unknown news, where we can see that the Ukrainians have now mounted a Mark 19 grenade launcher onto the back of a pickup truck, and we're firing it into the distance. And so, here's the video of that neat little contraption right here.
Да. Чечня нахуй, бля. Ебать по ухам ебал.
It's literally a drive-by shooting. They shot the grenade launcher and then they just floor it.
Чечня нахуй, бля. Ебать по
And they're
ушам
gone.
ебал. Вот это заебись получилось. Что можно сказать, что сделали? И ваши Да.
Now they're firing it again.
Нажимай на спуск, не йде. Блять, ты Василий, стреляй.
These guys are wearing out barrels right here. They're firing so many rounds out of this single Mark 19 at a given time. I bet you could wrap bacon around that barrel and it would cook. But we're gonna let the video continue.
Чечня нахуй, бля. Давай, газу, газу.
We see them driving off again. They're literally just pulling off drive-by shooting after drive-by shooting with this thing. And it is, of course, incredibly cool to see. The Ukrainians have been going above and beyond with both their bravery and their ingenuity in this war to make do with what they have. And also, Zelensky's been a great part in Ukraine's defense by, of course, pretty much cheerleading for Ukraine, letting their cause be known around the world, and, of course, lobbying pretty much foreign countries for military support, which they've been getting in leaps and bounds. As far as I've been able to tell, because I did try and look into the Lend-lease situation a little bit more, the Lend-lease will be coming into effect in about a month or two, and so there will be a massive wave of equipment and supplies that will be making its way to Ukraine probably by the middle to later part of September or the very early part of October, just in time for the Rasputitsa season when Ukraine will have the biggest advantage over the Russians again. With that, it is now time for us to do some reading, and I know everyone loves reading, and everyone loves to hear me read. And so welcome everyone to my version of the Reading Rainbow. We have gotten a report from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine about what's been going on exactly on the front lines, and due to us not getting a lot of video and picture evidence, and knowing that the Ukrainian government cannot exactly lie about settlements that are lost, because it would be obvious that they're lost, we're going to be using this statement made today on August 13th, 2022. Well, actually, this was made about 6 hours ago, but apparently over there it was still August 13th. We're going to be making adjustments to our front lines based off of this report, so that way we can try and get the front lines about as accurate as possible. So you can see it start off pretty good. Slava Ukraini. The 171st day of the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people to a Russian military invasion continues. The enemy is concentrating its efforts on establishing full control over the territories of the Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, maintaining the temporarily captured areas of the Kherson Oblast and parts of the Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and Mykolaiv oblasts, creating favorable conditions for resuming the offensive in certain directions, as well as blocking Ukraine's maritime communications in the Black Sea. There are no major changes on the Volyn, Policia, and Seversky directions. And just for those of y'all, in case y'all don't know, so that way we could reference this stuff on the map, I believe Seversky is also Seversk, but we can check real quick just to make sure. Seversky. So it appears that that would be a correct statement, by and large, from what we can tell on Google Maps. So, apparently there's been no changes in the Luhansk area. While there's a little bit of fighting here, the front line remains completely stable, according to the Ukrainians. There are no major changes. Oh, we already read that. In the Kharkiv direction, the enemy continue to attack targets in the area of Kharkiv, Udi, Dementivka, Ruski Tishki, Cherkasy Tishki, Veliki Prohody, Prudyanka, Protopompivka, Petrivka, Stary Saltiv, Verkny Saltiv, Mospanove, and the Kurapchkne, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, settlements in the Kharkiv direction. It carried out airstrikes near Stary Saltiv and Mospanove. And so based off of that, we can see that our first report is from the Kharkiv area, and if we were to base this, the enemy continued attacks in the area of Kharkiv. And so, knowing that Kharkiv was mentioned in this list, I'm assuming that this is based off of artillery barrages, and so the Russians, of course, are not on the outskirts of Kharkiv again, because it also listed Ruski Tishki, which is about 5 miles out of the city. So it appears that artillery barrages are continuing in mass in this area, but we're not seeing any advances from the Russians once more. Also based off of this, it appears that the Ukrainians still control pretty much everything we have here, but I will have to make one change because, let me make sure I'm reading this correctly, we do not have the village of Staritsia on this list. And so we're going to have to get rid of this little finger because some people have mentioned this before, and according to the official Ukrainian report, it appears that this may not be in Ukrainian hands anymore, although they did make it to the Russian border a while ago in that area, which was really cool, and I remember that day. It was a neat one because they actually took a Ukrainian border marker and put it right back on the border. So now we've adjusted that front line about as good as we can get it. So moving on from the Kharkiv area in the Sloviansk direction, so we're now going to be moving down here and adjusting our front lines here. Shelling was recorded near Dolinia, Brashkivka, Nordsivka, Dobrivne, Mzhnivka, and Bohorochine. So let me make sure that we got all of that in Ukrainian hands. Bohorochine is right there, so it is in Ukrainian hands as far as we know right now. Dolina is right there. Brashkivka is... Wait a minute, Brashkivka, where's Brashkivka? Oh, there it is, Brashkivka. So we'll extend our front line a little bit in that direction so that way it shows that the Russians may be extending a little bit off the highway in this area. So we'll do it about right there. And Dovhenke, what about Dovhenke? I don't see it there, but we don't have a confirmation either that it's been taken. So we're just going to adjust that front line like that for now and keep it there. So with that, let's read on. In the Kramatorsk direction, the enemy shelled the districts of Kramatorsk. So let's move on down towards Kramatorsk. We know that there will not be any frontline developments here because they simply do not exist. The enemy shelled the districts of Kramatorsk, I'm so sorry, I can't even pronounce that one. I'm not even going to try because it'll just be a butchery. Khorivka, I butchered that one as well, with barrel and jet artillery. With offensive and assault actions, the enemy units trying to advance in the direction of the Lysychansk refinery. Hang on, Lysychansk refinery. Let's check that out real quick. The Lysychansk refinery. Oh, wait a minute. This is the Lysychansk refinery. We've actually seen this attacked before by both sides. And so based off of that, there is no way. Wait a minute. Let me make sure. I'm trying to check this. So Verkno Kamyanka is right there. And Verkno Kamyanka. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute, that's Yonske. What about Kamyanka? I think this is actually what Topolivka. Let's see where that is on this map. So wait a minute, we're going to have to make a frontline adjustment because Verkno Kamyanka is actually the Lysychansk oil refinery, and the Russians have actually not captured this oil refinery. And so the Russians are actually behind the refinery and apparently also behind Zolotarivka. So we're going to have to adjust our front lines here to give the Ukrainians a little bit more breathing room. This is a pretty nice front line change. So let me do this real quick. Let's take this here. Move that right there so they connect, and then we will move it about right there. So that way it's about as representative as we can get from this report. Nice adjustment. The Ukrainians, based off of this little map adjustment we've just had, have gained about another 2 miles of front line in between the front and Seversk itself. So with that, let's move on to the next little bit. With offensive and assault actions, the enemy tried to advance on the refinery. Ivano-Darivka. So apparently they have taken Sperne, so we will have to make another adjustment here, which will throw us down to the Donbass pretty much, well, Donetsk itself. So we're going to have to move this about right here. Take that and move it around there. So that is about as representative as we can get right now based off of that report. And let's see, what else? Fighting continues. Let's see, Ivano, Darivka, and Mykolaievka, Vimiki. So Mykolaievka, where's Mykolaievka? Mykolaievka is right there to Vimika. So apparently the Russians have actually extended out a pretty decent bit. It looks like Soledar may actually be the front line right now. So let's adjust that real quick. So we're going to move out to Mykolaievka, about right there. We didn't get a specific mention of Rostolivka, so we're going to just leave that the way it is, move that up there, and then move this about right there, which should make our front line about as good as we can get right now. So we can see that there's actually kind of a new finger forming around Seversk, and it's getting into a similar situation that Severodonetsk and Lysychansk was in previously. So moving on from that, fighting continues in the direction of Sperne and Ivano-Darivka. So let's check that out real quick. Sperne, where's Sperne? And then Ivano. Okay, so we actually need to adjust this front line again because apparently Sperne is still in Ukrainian hands as well. Oh, ooh. Let's go back and change that real quick. So let's go adjust that to include Sperne. Nice. So the Ukrainians are actually holding on to most of the villages in the area. Good to know. So, still, this is a larger advance than we assumed. We still assumed that the Ukrainians were fighting across the T-1302 highway, and according to the Ukrainian report, apparently the Russians have been able to push across and into the area of Mykolaiivka. I'm not sure if the Ukrainians still hold on to Yakovlivka, because we do not get that in this report. Wait a minute, hang on. Enemy tanks hit Chasiv Yar, Bakhmut, Yakovlivka. Wait a minute, the Ukrainians still do control Yakovlivka as well, so let's adjust real quick for that. It seems like as the report goes on, what we're originally seeing, which is like, oh man, the Russians may have taken a decent amount of ground, then turns into, well, not really. So let's continue to read on. Let's see. There's Yakovlivka, Sperne, Soledar, Rostolivka, Vrshnia. I'm looking for Vesely because if Vesely's in there, then that's gonna. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like. Wait a minute. Airstrikes were recorded near Yakovlivka, Vesela. Well, I have to adjust it again because apparently the Ukrainians also control Vesely, and the Russians are bombarding it with airstrikes. So now we have to pretty much adjust the frontline map back to where we were at the start. So let's do that real quick. And so with that, we're going to click save. 1 second, let's just read through real quick. In the Avdiivka, occupiers fired. The front line there has largely remained unchanged. I can tell that. The invader waged defensive battles in the direction of Nosolivka, Druha. Let's see. Enemy shelled. Everything else looks the same. And so, based off of our frontline assessment, really the only amount of ground that the Russians have gained has been in 2 areas. And really, I think these may just be adjustments that were long overdue, which is in the Kamyanka area here near Izium, and also down here in the area of Berestova, even though that's also questionable. But with that, pretty interesting results there. We actually see that a lot of the front line, as far as we can see right now, does remain the same. But real quick, let me check this. In Zaporizhia, Volodymyrivka. Wow, I butchered that again. Sorry about that. Kamyansky. Let's see if Kamyansky is on there. Let's see, Kamyansky. Don't see that. Alright, so with that, we're going to keep the rest of the front lines as they are right now, and this does show that even on official Ukrainian reports, which are more up-to-date on the frontline developments than we are, our front line, our map, actually held up against a little bit of scrutiny there, because I've seen some people saying the map isn't accurate, and I wanted to make sure that it was based off of a Ukrainian report. And so with that, we're now going to be moving into the Kharkiv area and the Donbass news, which we just covered a second ago. But before we get there, we're going to have to take a quick pause to address the fundraiser and also answer 3 questions from the chat. And so without further ado, Matthew, take it away.
All right, folks, and moving into the first question segment, most of you will note that we were paid a visit from the Cambot very early on in the stream, and it was Stugnid. However, I found it really funny. It appears the Cambot might be pro-Ukrainian because it was bashing Putin in its username. I thought that was pretty weird. Did you see it, Enforcer?
I actually didn't, because I think I was combing over that report too thoroughly, but I would not doubt it, because I think even the Cambots know that Putin isn't really a nice guy.
Yes, it's a sad day when the Russians are so badly in the wrong that even the Cambot knows he's in the wrong. But anyways, moving on to our first order of business, we have 2 polls to address. First up, we have the one that was, what do you think caused the man to go crazy? And that was the guy that was stomping around in the first video. 52% said vodka, vodka, vodka. And I would have to agree with you on that. And 23% said he's had enough, lost his mind. And 25% said it's normal, no worries.
I like how a quarter of all of y'all, 1 in every 4, is like, it's okay. And then like a lot of y'all are like, he's drunk. And I would have to say that's probably the case, because Russia actually has a historical problem. It's pretty much a proven fact statistically with alcoholism, which is something that is pretty much a stereotype of theirs, and surprisingly enough, it holds up to scrutiny. There's more people that die in Russia from alcoholism than I believe any other country over the past year, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Anyways, with that, let's move on to that next poll.
And moving on to the second poll, this one was actually suggested by Pakatang, so I have to give him credit for that. And the question was, how long do you think the interest and support of the U.S. public will continue for the war? 49% said until the war is won, and that is the most popular option. 27% said 6+ months. 18% said 1+ years, and 6% said 3+ years. So interesting results, and I would also have to agree with that 49%.
And I also have to agree with that 49% as well, because the interest and support in the public, I think, will stay around for quite some while. We can tell that right here in the stream, because even right now, we have 7,000 people watching, and we've had that number consistently over the past 5 or so months, which shows that the American public is largely still in support of this war, along with the rest of the world, because America only makes up 55% of our viewers. The other 35% of y'all, yeah, that would be correct. The other 35% of y'all are from around the rest of the world. So it shows that there's still a lot of support in the United States and a lot of support around the world. And so with that, now that we've covered that, let's move on to that fundraiser and let's see how far it's gotten, because it is insanely high right now.
All right, folks, and I am happy to report that we have hit $4.1 thousand on the fundraiser, so tremendous progress, and we have a $5,000 goal, so only $900 more until we smash that goal, and I have no doubt that we'll be well above goal tonight because we've already come very close to reaching it. And also, we do have quite a few top donors, but before we get to that, I have to say, yeehaw!
And also,
thank you very much for all of your generosity.
And also, while we list off everyone, can we do this real quick, Matthew? Drop the slow chat altogether. No slow chat. While we read off the top donors, everyone spam LSA in the chat while we do it, and then at the end we'll put slow mode back on. But knock off slow mode, start spamming the LSAs, and let's hear the top donors for the night.
All right, so one moment while I remove that slow mode for the moment. There we go. Slow mode has been removed, so fire away, LSA, go crazy in the chat. But anyways, moving on to our top donors, we have a $500 donation from Anonymous. They did not want to tell us their name, so we can't give them credit. But Anonymous, you know who you are, and thank you very much for your very generous support of Razom in Ukraine. And up next, we have a $250 donation from DCC Prime 1, a $200 donation from I'm Your Huckleberry, and a $150 donation from Dima Tigachenko. Those are the top donations of the night, and then we have several more. We have a $100 donation from BC Skyman, Kimberly Brokaw, William Allen, Con Azor, RC, Ashley, Amy Atkins, and then we have several $50 donations. We have the first one from Rust and Rot, Bass Girl, Bill Franz, Richard Bell, Spencer, Igor C., John Webster, and Sharon Tukolsky. We also have a $100 donation that just came in from Jack Ray. Let's see here also, to make sure I'm not missing anything here. A $900 donation from Spencer. Tremendous donation. That is the largest one of the night. Thank you very much, Spencer. It did. It just came through.
Where? I don't see it. I'm trying to find it.
It's in there somewhere. It's about, I don't know, about 90 chats up.
90 chats up. Let me find it. I saw Jack Ray's for 100, but where is... Oh, man, it doesn't let my chat go up that high. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe... Wait a minute, I have top chat on. Maybe that's it. Let me go to live chat real quick. Oh, man, it doesn't show it to me. But we just passed $5,000! We just passed it! Let's go! We just did it tonight. We passed the goal, and the question is... Can we make it to $400,000 tonight? Adding in 5.2 thousand? Let's do the math real quick. Let's do that math. I know that's really exciting.
No, not math.
I know, and I'm not good at math either, so just take this with a grain of salt, everyone. But $391,747 plus 5.2 thousand equals $396,947.
Let's go.
Is it possible to get another $3,000 on tonight's fundraiser and put this channel and its total donations to nonprofits operating Ukraine over $400,000? I know it's possible. The Lee Spring Army can do anything. And also, the chat is going wild right now. We have 670 chats coming in per minute right now. It's now gone up to 1,000 per minute. And let's see if we can keep that going for just about a minute more, and then we're going to have to put slow chat back on, so that way we don't sit here and break YouTube. But with that, we are now on into the question segment. And so, Matthew, if you would like, please read off the first question of the first segment for the night.
All right, and just a quick note, folks. Tonight, we do not have super chats, as most of you already know. We just have donations to the fundraiser. So if you want your question answered, tag either me, Enforcer Matt, or the Enforcer, and put your question in the live chat, and I'll put it in the spreadsheet, and most likely we'll be able to get to it tonight. But first up, we have our decoders of the stream, Mark Hodges and WF2U, who have figured out the Morse code. They said first message points to warehouse and parking lot just north of the Antonovsky Bridge, and second Morse message is it physically possible to get so angry that the vodka boils out of your blood? The Russians will find out. And from that first video, we did see that actually happen.
We did see it happen. I think he may have actually physically boiled the blood out of his body. But also, you are correct on both of them. The little place we marked on the map tonight in the Morse code message was right here. And so congratulations for deciphering the Morse code. Once again, it is always our usual suspects with that. And also, I don't know if you saw it, Matthew, but amongst all of the messages that are moving at 1,000 miles per hour, we had a $400 super chat come in. Did you see that?
I did not. And you called it a super chat, Enforcer. You made the same mistake I make.
The donation. I'm sorry. We get so caught up. Well, not caught up, but we get so used to seeing super chats that we call everything super chats. But these are donations tonight. But we'll go over that maybe a little bit later about how that works, just in case we have new viewers here. But still.
And oh boy, Enforcer, we're almost at $6,000. We're sitting just at $5,900. So already almost 1,000 over goal. Is there nothing the Lee Spring Army can't do?
The Lee Spring Army is an unstoppable machine, and as we can see in the live chat right now, they are going insane. I mean, let's see. Who is the Enforcer partner talking? What's his name? His name is Enforcer Matt, and he is a true G, and he's my brother. But I hope that answers your question. G. Say what?
Top G.
Top G, that's correct. I would have to agree. I don't know what that means.
Just joking, folks. Just joking. Some people will know what I'm talking about.
But with that, we are now going to throw the slow chat back on. I'm sorry, everyone, but the spam is going insane. Right now, we're getting about 1,000 chats per minute, and I want to make sure that when new people come on, they don't just see us going absolutely insane. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next question. Also, congratulations to all of our Morse code readers tonight for getting the codes correct. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And folks, just one more reminder, we only have 9 more questions in the queue. So if you want yours answered, put it in, and it's very likely it'll get answered. So next up, we have a question from El Fuego, who says, any plans for when you hit 100,000 subs?
100,000 subs. Well, I'm not saying this is definite or anything, but one of the plans that I had when reaching 100,000 subs is trying to get on national TV. You know, I know that I talk about mainstream news a lot, but I don't really care how we raise support for Ukraine and also keep reporting this news. If I had to go on to, you know, national news channels here in the United States and talk about what this channel has done in support for Ukraine, I would. That's something I've been thinking about, and also that would be a face reveal. It would be almost 2 birds in 1 stone. We would do a face reveal on the channel, and we would also try and go to morning shows and such things like that and talk about the support we've raised for Ukraine and what we're trying to do as a channel. I think it's honestly a neat idea. I'm thinking about the face reveal. Some people have actually seen me in real life. There's one in here that I know he's seen me in real life because him and my me and how do I say this? His family and I have met several times in real life, and they are incredibly cool. I'm not going to mention his name for privacy reasons because I've said it before, but don't want to say it too many times. But still, I think a face reveal would be cool. I don't know about y'all, but I would like to do that. And we've said that before with 50K and all of that, but now at this point, with us getting this far into YouTube and getting this big, I don't think it would be that bad of a thing. So with that, we are on to our final question of this segment, and then we'll be moving on into the next bit of news.
All right, and moving on to our last one of this segment. First up, I want to give a shout out to Michael Tachonic for putting in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. Thank you very much, Michael, for your generosity. And our last question goes to Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, was there another failed attempt to assassinate Zelensky today?
I did not hear about it. If there was, it crossed over my radar without ringing any bells, and so if there was, unfortunately, I didn't hear about it. And so, in that regard, I'm going to have to declare ignorance, but I do thank you so much for the question. Also, thank you so much, Pakatang, for being around forever and being a member of this Lee Spring Army. And we just did it! We have now gotten to $6,000 on the fundraiser. Can we get to $8,000? If we get to $8,000, we'll have raised, in total, $400,000 total over all of our fundraisers in support for Ukraine. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment. If y'all would like to ask a question tonight, we do not have any super chats in queue. So you can ask any question you want, and it may actually be answered. So just at Enforcer, if you have one, Matthew will see it. He will then put you on a watch list. I'm just kidding. He'll actually put you on the spreadsheet, and then we'll get around later on in the night to answering your question. Once again, I make no guarantees that I may have an answer to every single question. If you ask me about the glide slope of a HARM AGM-88 missile after 15 miles of flight, I am not going to have an idea about that. I don't get too technical with stuff like that, but I may be able to give you an answer to your question. So just feel free to fire away and ask, and we might be able to. With that, we're now moving into the Kharkiv area, where we've seen an interesting sight today on the front lines, where we can see that the 22nd Motorized Infantry Battalion was able to destroy a Russian MTLB today. And so here's the video of that happening. We can see the MTLB right there. This is, of course, the same picture that the Ukrainians have used in every video. And we can also see the Ukrainian T-64BM. We can see the barrel of it there in the tree line, and it's fired. The round then travels a little bit of a ways, and then lands right there. You see the shells coming in still. And I feel, honestly, just being honest here, I feel like we've seen this video before. I don't know about you, Matthew, but this one seems familiar.
It could be.
It does seem like that. And there's the destroyed MTLB, another one knocked out. Or, if my gut feeling is correct, this may actually be an old video, and this may have been an old one that was knocked out. But from that, we're going to move into the downtown area of Kharkiv, in the River District, I believe it's called, to see what Kharkiv is looking like these days. So let's take a look at the town. That's a nice building to start off with, actually. But, let's see.
Downtown riverfront Kharkiv. Some people don't like graffiti, but I love the Ukrainian murals. And even some of the graffiti is cool. Check that one out. In this old building. And nobody does old buildings quite like the Ukrainians.
Pretty sketch start to the beginning of the video. This building had it starting off on shaky footing, but after it panned over to the right a little bit to that beautifully restored building right here, the rest of the video was actually pretty nice. I would still have to say it looks better than Birmingham, Alabama, and that is a huge, well, not really a huge statement to make, because anything, honestly, kind of looked better than Birmingham, Alabama when we went around on Google Maps last night and looked at everything. So with that, we are going to be moving on to our next bit of news outside of Kharkiv, because of course, we've heard, according to the Ukrainian report, that there are attacks and artillery barrages occurring in this area, but of course it appears that the Russians are not making any advances and are kind of spinning their wheels in mud. Moving on out of the area of Kharkiv, pretty much, and past Chuiv, where of course there is nothing to report, and past the Balaklia and Izium area by and large, we've now moved down to the area around Krasnopilia and Dolnia, where we can see that the Ukrainians have fired back at the Russians in this area. Here's the video showing that very thing. The 4th Tank Brigade. You know, sometimes I wonder why I stutter like that. I know that some of y'all are like, dang, why is he stuttering? And don't worry, I also think that too when it happens. I'm like, why? Why is it happening? And I think I'm talking too fast, but I'm kind of excited tonight because we're doing amazingly with the fundraiser, and also, there's just such good news to report. Anyways, we can see the 4th Tank Brigade's SPG artillery battery giving a little bit of fire to the Russians in the area of Sloviansk. We can now see that artillery fire raining down on what appears to be a Russian supply depot. This is not going to be fun for the Russians. As we know, every time a supply depot is hit, Russians' hopes and dreams begin to evaporate, and Russians at home become angrier and angrier and start causing themselves bodily harm when kicking the car of someone they disagree with. We're now going to be moving out of the Sloviansk area, as there's not really a lot of news report beyond that single video, and we're now moving down into the Seversk finger, which is starting to form as far as we can tell on the front line that we've updated today. Starting off, we can see the 503rd Brigade hitting the Russians across the Donetsk River. If the video loads, everyone have a little bit of patience. Sometimes these videos take a moment to load. And here we go. Now, let's unmute this and see if it has copyrighted music. It does not. The Russians are trekking their way through the woods. The guy in the background is going, "Blyat, my dad, he stopped his toe on the car today when he got pissed off." And the guy in the front's like, shut up, man. I don't want to be here. They now walk into a destroyed house. It seems, well, actually, they're walking around a destroyed house, and they're still walking through a tree line.
Enforcer, I have to interrupt real quick if you could pause that video for just a moment.
Yes?
Spencer, I have to give you a tremendous shout out. He put in that $900 donation earlier, and he just put in a $1,000 donation. So that puts him at a $2,000 almost donation. So Spencer, you get a special shout out, and we interrupt the stream to tell everybody that he's a very generous person.
I've got to say, Spencer, that is impressive. We haven't had anyone come through on the fundraisers and just throw down massive bucks in a while. At least as far back as I can remember. I think the last big ones were about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago. So this is a big night, especially from you, Spencer, and thank you so much for helping out Razom of Ukraine. It helps out Ukrainian soldiers once they get out of the war to begin to have a normal life and be successful at it. And of course, any veteran of any military in the world can tell you that that is an important and really unparalleled service for them. A lot of people who go into the military learn a certain way of doing things, and once you get out, the military and the world, the normal world, kind of work in two separate ways, and so it takes a little bit of learning to figure out how to operate in the civilian world, much like it takes to learn how to operate in the military world. And so they do a invaluable service to Ukrainian soldiers, and I thank you so much for believing in their cause and helping to support it a great deal. And so we're now going to let this video continue, and everyone give a huge round of applause. Well, you can't really do that because it's a live chat, but everyone give a huge thank you to Spencer because he just got us up to $7.4 thousand. We're only $600 away from reaching $400,000 total raised in support for Ukraine. And we see the artillery raining down on the Russians. And I don't think the Russians are having a fun time. I don't know about y'all, but if y'all want to have a poll on that, yes or no answer, are the Russians having a fun time? I would like to know what y'all are thinking right now. That's the end of the video, and once again, the Ukrainians are handing it to the Russians. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news from the Seversk area, where we can see the Ukrainians firing a man-pad. I'm going to have to mute it because it does have copyrighted music, and also, notice the Seinfeld episode that I have in my lineup for more videos. I have been watching a little bit more Seinfeld lately, just for those of y'all who don't know. We now see the Ukrainians pulling out the cases with the man-pads in them. And look at that. They're now aiming it. Wow, they have a little battery going on here. Look at this. They got 2 of them. And if someone could tell me, because I know we have people from all around the world, what language is this here? I'm not really sure which, but it's certainly, I would assume it's either Polish or Swedish. I'm not exactly sure, though, so take that statement with a grain of salt, because I'm sure someone's about to give one option over the other, and then tell me, goofy, it's obviously not so-and-so. But anyways, I'm going to let the video continue. And then we can see one of those man-pad missiles on their way. Well, wait a minute. What in God's green earth happened here? I don't even know what happened. I don't know if that intercepted a shell, or was that the man-pad missile intercepting a missile? I could not tell you. But that was cool, whatever just happened right there. So that's the end of the video, and a pretty cool one showing the Ukrainians still using man-pads in this area of the front. We're now going to be moving further down the line and entirely past the Verkno-Kamyanka area, the Vimivka area, the Yakovlivka area, the Soledar area, and now we're down towards Bakhmut, where we've seen today a Russian tank destroyed. This isn't anything new, but it does show that the Ukrainians are still wiping the floor against the Russians. A lot of people always say that the Ukrainians will be getting into the scrap industry after war, but one thing I have to say I think the Ukrainians will be getting into is the custodial services, because they can clean up. You can see the Russian tank burning out there in the middle of this burned field, and it looks like that tank did not have a fun time. I don't know about y'all, but I would call that well cooked. A little bit of a puffs and chuffs coming out of it, kind of like a pressure cooker. And with that, that's the end of the video. It's nice to see that the Ukrainians are still knocking out tanks all across the front lines, and we know, good and well, that this is probably never going to come to an end for the Russians. The war is just going to continue to grind on, the front lines will hardly move, and if they do, they usually will be in Ukraine's favor, and the Russians, for all of the blood they spill, will only gain about an additional mile of ground, which is pretty much World War I levels of victory. We're now going to be moving further down the line to Orlivka, where you can see the Russians getting blistered in a little lightning counterattack by the Ukrainians in the area. And so here's a video of that happening. We can hear some pretty chill music playing, and of course YouTube already has pulled out a baseball bat and is standing behind me getting ready that if I play another 4 seconds of that music, they will take my head off. We can see the Russians moving around in the trenches down here. And it looks like a Russian apparently read a manual somewhere to put... Well, no. I had hope in him until the very end of this video right here. Look at that perfectly straight line of a trench. You're going to get everyone killed with that. Just letting you know. Make sure to make breaks in your trenches. We can see the Russians still wandering around in the trenches. Also, they're kind of chilling down there. Now we can see the artillery rounds coming in, and the panic then ensues. The Russians are now doing a conga line down the trenches, most likely because they know a lot of money is well on the way. They're still moving down the trench. And now they've gotten to a pretty decently made one. It actually has sidings on the trench walls made of wood and what looks like maybe tin or aluminum. They're now walking back down the direction they came. Wait a minute. Hey, look! They're filming a propaganda clip. Wait a minute, no. Wait a minute. Propaganda. I don't know who we're watching right now because the video is titled, "The Ukrainians Get Them in a Counterattack," but I don't see any enemy forces that they're firing at here in this building, so I don't know if these are the Russians or the Ukrainians. I can't really tell you, but I don't see anyone in that building, so I don't know if it is a Ukrainian or a Russian who they're really firing at right there. We now see some smoke billowing out of the trench. You know, I'd largely have to assume, now that I'm thinking about it, that the Ukrainians would have started off filming the Russians moving around in their own trench, and then we might see the Ukrainians later. Because the Ukrainians just showed us in that footage right there, this trench getting obliterated. So I'm assuming that it must be the Russians. Yeah, so now we can see over here that they're saying that there's 200s, which means that some of them have been taken out. So these are definitely the Russians in the film. We're not going to pass any discernible judgment, though, because we have done that in videos before, and we've never really been exactly sure who was who until really the end of the video. So we're still going to hold judgment for now, but I do think that these are the Russians. The artillery is still raining down around the trenches. That one was almost dead onto the trench. I would just have to assume these are the Russians. Yep, white armband, I saw it, they're Russians. We now see some 300s, apparently. Dolomoga 300M. We now see some Russians running to the trench with shopping bags. That's an interesting thing to do. I wonder what that's for. Matthew, I don't know about you, but I saw the Chow in chat say, too accurate to be Russian artillery, and for some reason in my head, I heard Obi-Wan Kenobi in the first Star Wars, you know, Star Wars A New Hope, saying, this is too accurate to be Sand people. You know?
Yes, true.
And also, yes, there is a Ukraine watermark at the top, which makes me assume that they obviously would not be showing Ukrainians getting hit by artillery. This is most likely Ukrainian artillery blistering Russians. And now we can see that it's moved on to a different area. This appears to be a neighborhood that may be behind or in front of the trenches.
The arrows are pretty helpful.
Yes. And now we can see that it's also being hit by artillery. With that, that's the end of the video, and I've got to say, the Russians are getting the short end of the stick. Don't know about y'all. I don't know if you see that too, Matthew, but it looks like that artillery fire is too accurate to be Sand people.
It must be. The Russians are never that accurate.
They are stormtroopers, the Empire's best. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still slamming down the artillery fire with deadly accuracy on the Russians, and apparently making them pay for the trench they just took. With that, we're now going to be moving on down the lines towards our last bits of news, which will be from the Donetsk area and also the southern front, as well as Kherson. But before we get to all of that news and the speech from President Zelensky, we are going to go into another question segment, answer 3 questions from the chat, see how far the fundraisers made it, and then once we do all of that, we'll then be moving on into the next and final news segment of the night. And so, without further ado, Matthew, what do we have?
All right, folks, for the second to last question segment, up first we have a poll that we must address. And the question is, are the Russians having a fun time? That question was kind of open to interpretation about what that actually meant, but it looks like 60% of you, the majority, said no fun for them. 30% said yes, much fun, and 10% said, what fun?
So we can see the two classes of people here clashing in conflict over the decision of what is funnier. Yes, much fun, or no fun. So what's interesting to me is it's kind of like an argument in between the glass is half full and the glass is half empty. That's kind of how that poll looked, and I can see that a lot of y'all think that the glass is half empty for the Russians, and I would have to agree with y'all. I don't think they're having a lot of fun. So with that, now that we've addressed that poll, what is the fundraiser looking like, Matthew?
All right, folks, and we are now sitting at $7,747 on the fundraiser. So absolutely tremendous. 8,000. We just hit an even 8,000. I
Oh!
can't believe that. Just literally 8,000,000.
We
So
just did
whoever
it!
did that, let's see, who did that? I don't see a donation anywhere.
Did YouTube come through?
That's weird. It's like it rounded up exactly to 8,000.
Well, everyone, I have to say, thank you all so much for coming. We have now reached $400,000 total raised over the whole entire war in Ukraine. $400,000. For that and that reason alone, we are going to be lifting the restrictions on the slow chat again for everyone to spam LSA for this momentous and historic occasion on this channel. It's unbelievable to think that we've been able to do this over 172 days, and there is no way we could have done it without y'all. And so thank you to every single one of y'all once again, and spam the hell out of LSA, because that is the group that has got this done. Leave Spring Army for life. And so with that, we're going to move... And on that yeehaw, we're now going to move into the question segment and answer 3 questions from the chat. And then we're going to be moving into our final segment of the news for tonight on an incredibly high note. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And actually, Enforcer, we must address our top donors for this segment. And up first, we have a $100 donation from Dutch Reb, or something like that. I'm not Dutch or EB or something. But thank you very much for your generosity. And we also have a $100 donation from Makara and several $50 donations. We have 3 of them. One from W, one from Loy Wen, and one from Phil Tatham. And also we had a $50 Canadian donation coming from David Rockin1. And we also had, let's see here, I thought I missed one, but I didn't. So thank you very much to all of you for your generosity. Once again, we are now sitting at $8,044 on the donations. So tremendous work and absolutely great progress. So, moving back up to my spreadsheet here, we do have our first question of the segment, which comes from Kim Henning, who says, do you think the sanctions, war, and loss of gas and oil sales will melt down the Russian economy in 2023?
I think it may. We're already seeing that happening now, especially with what appears to be happening in the Russian economy. They're having shortages of sugar and flour, and while the news on that has been suppressed, as far as we've been able to tell, that is still going on inside of Russia. And so the supply side of things is not getting any better. And so with that in mind, the economy can also not be improving, because supply and the economy are pretty much one and the same, especially when you're talking about on the domestic side of things. And so with that in mind, the Russians may be looking at economic ruin within the next year or 2. I'm not saying it'll be immediately next year, but if you give this enough time to take play, the Russians may not be able to recover from this for decades. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and I see our chat rate is well above 300, so a lot of chats coming in really fast. And up next, we have a question from Didi Lechuga, who says, when they are talking about tanks or other artillery pieces being self-propelled, what does it mean to them? Does it mean that tank can run by itself or remote control?
Can you reread that one again so that way I can make sure to understand it?
Yes, Lechuga said, when they are talking about tanks or other artillery pieces being self-propelled, what does it mean? Does it mean that tank can run by itself or remote control?
If a gun and an artillery piece is self-propelled, that means it doesn't have to be towed. And let me show you what that means. M777 towed. So let me see if I can find you a picture here. This is an M777 on the move. Let me try and find you a better picture that's a little bit larger. Here's an M35 carrying an M777 behind it. And that is a towed artillery piece. It is not self-propelled. It requires another vehicle to move it around. On the other hand, if you were to look at something like a Caesar SPG, the artillery piece itself is attached to the truck and is able to move on its own. And so for that reason, it is given the name self-propelled gun, because it doesn't require to be attached to anything else to move. The artillery piece and the vehicle are one and the same, and so it can move independently of everything else. And so I hope that answers that question. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment.
And folks, I had to go ahead and put slow mode back on because I was actually starting to have some lag issues on my end. So thank you all for putting LSA in the chat, and our chat rate got extremely high there. I think it got above 700, so that's tremendous. But up next, we have a question from Robert Villeneuve, who says, what are your daily go-to sources when you look at producing the show every day?
That is an excellent question, and to answer that, there are several. There are a couple of subreddits on Reddit that do an incredibly good job of gathering up a lot of video evidence on the war every single day. One of the top ones I use is combat footage. The other thing that we use is Twitter. Twitter also has a decent amount of combat footage, but usually Twitter revolves more so around news headlines and things like that, which of course we never use, more so than videos. And so we largely rely on Reddit for a lot of our videos and information, and then we go and compile them all by location, time of day, and then we figure out, based out of all of those videos, if they happen in a single area, what actually happened in that area for the day, because you can kind of get a good idea of what happened based off of video and picture evidence. And so with that, I hope that answers your question. That was actually a really good one about how I work behind the scenes. And so with that, we have reached the end of this question segment, and we are on top of the world right now at $8,000 raised tonight. I'm wondering, now there's no pressure at all anymore because we've done well above and beyond anything that we could have done tonight. We've already made it to 400,000 total raised. And so my question is now, could we make it a 10K to make it a nice even round number? No pressure. I'm not trying to like pressure y'all anymore to support, but still that would be cool if we could reach 10K. So with that, with all of the impressive good news that we've gotten from the Lee Spring Army and this stream tonight, we are going to roll through the last segment of news and the speech from President Zelensky, and then we're going to answer questions probably until around 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, most likely, because we have to, even though it's my off day, I have to get up early tomorrow because we have some stuff going on pertaining to surgeries. So with that, we're now going to be moving on down into the Donetsk region, and starting off at Avdiivka, we've seen the DPR soldiers coming on a rocket barrage, and I can tell you by the way this camera is moving, he's having a little bit of a panic. So here's the video. I would be panicking too if I was running down a trench that looked like the hallway in The Shining, because that's never a good sign. And it's landing close. That was the closest one yet, right there.
Ай-яй-яй-яй. Короче, вот после прилета.
It seems he's now gotten out of the trench.
Вот. Яма. Ебать, там где-то 1,5 метра вот таких вот осколков. Просто херова гора. Вот. Это одна, а вон вторая яма.
That's the end of the video, and I gotta tell you, while we usually see Ukrainians come and collect in our artillery barrages, you could tell that this guy was changing his camo pattern from a 4-tone or 5-tone Ratnik camouflage pattern to the 1-tone brown camouflage pattern. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news from the Donetsk area, where we have seen further down the line that in the area of Marinka, the Ukrainians have scored a hole-in-one, and it's a crazy picture at that. They blew up a Russian tank. The turret then went for a toss and then speared its way, well, javelined its way, get what I did there, back down into the tank, and the barrel is literally sticking out of the bottom, and the turret is in the middle of the air. The craziest picture I've ever seen of a tank destroyed in this war yet. We've seen turrets sticking out of the ground like this before, but we've never seen one fly right back down into the tank it came from and do something like that. And so with that, that's really the end of that picture. Not a lot to speak of there, rather than the destruction and what it looks like. And I gotta say, the Ukrainians continue to make modern art out of a lot of these tanks that the Russians keep on sending their way. Moving on to our last bit of news from the Donetsk front today. Matthew will enjoy this. More MRAPs have arrived and are on the move. And so here's the video of that happening. Let's pause that real quick and unmute it. And I've got it muted again because it's got music. That's a lot of MRAPs.
And these are going to Ukraine?
These are in Ukraine.
Wow, they got some nice ones.
They do. And they even got the 3-tone Sark camo MRAPs too. I like the 3-tone Sark. I think that's a really cool looking camo. And that's the end of the video. And it looks like the Ukrainians have gotten a couple of more MRAPs. The United States has pretty much given them the evolution of American, I guess you could say, utility vehicles and combat vehicles over the course of the past 20 years. The Ukrainians started off this war with Humvees, and now they've gotten to MRAPs, just like the United States did during the invasion of Iraq and the subsequent occupation for a couple of years, and also the war in Afghanistan, which lasted for about 20. Moving on into our next area of news. We don't have any offensive action to report from in the Donetsk area. The Russians are, of course, barraging the Ukrainians as well as the Ukrainians barraging the Russians, but neither side has made any advances in the area, and it appears they'll stay that way for quite some while. And so moving into the southern front, today we saw a HIMARS. La 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 la. Anyways, without blabbering on too long, here's the video of the HIMARS firing at an incredibly low angle. And we can see another one right up there as well. Now we can see them firing, and what a nice video. A really cool one to see, and I hope that those missiles find their way to a Russian ammunition depot and give it the good old blow-up treatment. And so with that, we're now moving on into our next bit of news. Down in the area of Melitopol, we weren't really able to figure out where this ammo dump was, so this marker is not accurate by any means, but we did see a Russian ammunition depot blow up today, and so here's the video of that happening. When you see them throwing text on screen, I do not know what it says, but the video pretty much explains what exactly happens. We now see some fire starting in this ammunition depot, and if you know anything about ammunition and fire, it's usually not good to mix the two. The Russians have not learned that yet. Now the whole place has gone up in flames, and the Russians are losing thousands of tons of ammunition again. That's the end of the video, and it is good to see that the Russians have lost another ammunition depot somewhere in southern Ukraine. With that, we're now going to be moving to Enerhodar, where we've heard that an artillery barrage has struck the Yacht Club. We were not able to figure out where that was before the stream. It is in Enerhodar, and I was wanting to come up here and see where that Yacht Club really is. And I'm assuming it would be here, because these look like boat sheds. So the marker needs to be adjusted a little bit, I believe. More so up towards here, right here. There's the Yacht Club. It's actually right there. And so apparently an artillery barrage hit the Yacht Club. We don't know the casualties yet, but here's the video of someone recording the aftermath of what the damage looked like. That's the end of the video, and of course, it's insane to believe that the Russians, as far as we know, are barraging the Enerhodar nuclear power plant area and pretty much holding it as a hostage in this war to threaten the Ukrainians and the rest of the Western world with nuclear contamination if they don't try and end this war. Moving on out of the entirety of the southern front and into the Kherson area, we've been getting some pretty good news today. I would like to start off with a little bit of the low-end news because I want to dispel something real quick that a lot of people have probably been saying. Did you see the video of the Russians bombing the Ukrainians with artillery in Kherson today? I did, and we're going to look at that video right here and explain why this is fake. When you see the Ukrainian soldiers moving along this path, and this part is not fake. These are obviously Ukrainian soldiers. We now see them still walking to this bridge on the railroad. And I want y'all to notice something here. The Ukrainians make it to this bridge. The camera zooms out. And then, right about, yep, right there. Did you notice that, Matthew? Let's watch that again. Did you notice that?
Notice what?
Did you notice that they cut the video and edited it to where the Ukrainians were walking right under that railroad bridge, and then in the next clip, the artillery lands right there? But the video was cut.
Yeah, and the drone's at a completely different altitude, too.
And a completely different zoom as well. And this is what the Russians do. This is how the Russians lie to you on video as well. And this is why a lot of video evidence has to be almost completely discredited when it comes from the Russians, because they do very skeezy stuff and underhanded stuff like this, like showing you these Ukrainians walking under that bridge, and then they go, cut the video, cut out about 3 to 5 minutes of footage where the Ukrainians passed under this bridge and on their way, and then they make it look like that artillery shell landed right on top of them. But the thing that you can see here, right before this starts, let's go back here real quick. You can see a Ukrainian soldier right there, and he's far enough away in this clip right there that you should see him in this one. But watch when they zoom in, there are no Ukrainian soldiers back there. Not a single one. Now we see a Ukrainian car pull up. We see some soldiers get in, they then close the van, hop in. Actually, this guy goes running off and tells the van to move on. And that's the end of the video. Once again, we see no sign of those 2 Ukrainian soldiers that were way far back that would have been outside of that artillery explosion, which lets us know that this video was heavily edited and cut out to where you could not really tell if the Ukrainians were hit or not. And this is what the Russians sell to their own people. They sell that this was actually a Ukrainian unit getting destroyed, and you can tell by the editing that if it really was hit directly by an artillery shell, why do the quick little cut and edit? Video just sits there. I don't even know why. They just let the video stretch on forever. And then another artillery shell lands. Even after the video shows... Wait a minute, hang on. An artillery shell lands. And we see a new truck turn around and start speeding away. I don't even know where that one popped up in the video. Some pretty fake stuff right there. And now that we've gotten past talking about the fake crap, we're now going to be moving into the real stuff we saw today. Starting off, we can see an M777 being fired by the Ukrainians once more. Also being towed by an M35.
Пора вечерять, а ми працюємо.
Pretty nice to see, and hopefully those rounds are hitting their mark. Moving on down the front lines again, towards the area of Kherson itself, we can see the Ukrainians launching a Tochka short-range ballistic missile at the Russians in the middle of this field.
Это нормальная ситуация. Да.
The Tochka's been launched, and it's now traveling on its way. So with that, that's the end of the video, and once again, another nice little clip showing us that the Ukrainians are not messing around. The Tochka, unfortunately, would not have a long enough range to hit the Saki airfield, so it was another kind of missile altogether that hit and destroyed the airfield. We're now going to be moving into Kherson itself, and this video was very dangerous in its premise, but I gotta say, I got a good laugh out of it because, fortunately, thank God, while these kids were not being supervised in a pretty dangerous area, They didn't get hurt. All they did was get a little scared and run off. So these kids are in the city of Kherson, and the Russians have pretty much just left weapons lying around after the battles that occurred there a long time ago. These kids managed to find what appeared to be an RPG 29. I can't really tell you for certain. It may be another kind of RPG, because I think that one's actually mounted on a tripod. They found some kind of RPG, the one that looks a lot like an AT-4. They also found an AK, and we're walking around the streets with both of these weapons, and they're live. There's actually an RPG round within that RPG launcher. The kid fires it on accident into a building right by them. The backblast almost gets the kid in the light green shirt, but thank God neither of them were hurt, and they just ran off very scared and dropped all the weapons they had. So I think, fortunately, they learned the lesson not to mess with weapons, and thank God none of them got hurt. But still, it was kind of a little funny. It was almost like a comedy in a way. But still, it's, when you really think about it, this is a crazy thing for kids to be living in. We could see him here aiming the little RPG, flinging it around in the air, playing with it like it's a toy. And then we can see him messing with it a little bit more. When you see them like, hey, what do we do with this? Like, how do we work it? And then he fires it. And thank the Lord, I was actually scared right here. This kid was in the way of the backblast, but you can tell it literally just passed right by him. Very lucky for him. And then they drop everything and they just go running. Probably back home, hopefully back home. So that's the end of the video, and while it was incredibly dangerous, and you know, it's still good that none of them got hurt, and that they were all safe in the end, and they just went running away and dropped all of the weapons altogether. They may never touch a gun or a weapon again over the course of this war if they find one, and hopefully they don't, because those kids, obviously, they have no knowledge of how to use these weapons, and they could get themselves hurt or killed using them. So it's good that they kind of learned their lesson in a very violent yet very non-injuring way, I guess is the best way to say it. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our final video from the Southern Front. Well, actually, the final two. We actually have pictures and a video. We can see in these with these pictures here that the Antonovsky Bridge has been hit for about the 7th time now. We can see that there's been a fire on one of the spans again, and also an explosion showing that there was another attack on the Antonovsky Bridge. We also have video backing up that those pictures right there. And so here's the video of the Antonovsky Bridge getting hit again by the HIMARS. When you see the air defense is trying to intercept the HIMARS, but one thing we know is that they're not successful, as you can see right there. You see the air defense is still trying to intercept these HIMARS, but just by and large being completely unsuccessful. Another explosion happened on the bridge. An explosion happened in air, right above their heads. And we can see another missile slam the bridge. Once again, the air defense is being completely moot in trying to stop these HIMARS missiles from hitting their target. You know, I think Russian air defenses are about as useless as one could ever imagine. They haven't stopped a single HIMARS missile that we can tell as of right now. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and we see that the Ukrainians are still hammering down on the Russians in this front. It appears that the Russians may actually be repairing the Antonovsky Bridge to a small degree, but the Ukrainians just come through after minor repairs are made and set them back by feet and miles, and destroy whatever progress they made at trying to make a makeshift fix on the bridge so it can continue to be used by heavy equipment. So far, we have not heard of any advances here in the Kherson front by either side. It appears that the Ukrainians are still standing by for what may come to be a counterattack, but at the same time, while a lot of mainstream news, and that's what makes me think that I'm kind of skeptical about this, a lot of mainstream news are saying that the counterattack is coming up soon, we're not entirely sure. And so with that, now that we've covered all of the news from every single front, we're now going to move to our last bit in Kyiv, which is the speech from President Zelensky, which will round out day 172's news, and then we'll be moving into a question segment and answering everyone's questions as best as possible. And so let me rewind this real quick, let me throw up some subtitles, and without further ado, here's the video. And also let me move them up.
Шановні українці, готуємось до дуже активних тижнів другої половини серпня. Переговори, зустрічі, Кримська платформа, нові звернення до закордонних спільнот, міжнародна правова активність за нашої ініціативи. Цього тижня продовжу збільшувати наші зв'язки з африканськими державами, з регіоном Латинської Америки. Завтра відбудуться важливі контакти на європейському рівні. Днями запланована церемонія вручення вірчих грамот послами іноземних держав, які прибули працювати в Києві. Хоч у глобальній політиці зараз певна пауза, все ж таки серпень, але для України, для інтересів нашої держави жодних пауз не було, немає і не буде. Працюємо над новими санкціями проти Росії, над тим, щоб простимулювати громадян держави-терориста відчути свою частину відповідальності за те, що відбувається. Дискусія про візові обмеження в Європі для власників російських паспортів щоденно розширюється. До неї приєднуються нові держави, нові політики. Зрештою, це має призвести до відповідних рішень. Я вдячний нашим розвідникам, правоохоронцям, журналістам та усім, хто працює для встановлення повних даних про російських вбивців. Україна і наші партнери отримують все більше інформації про безпосередньо відповідальних за терор і катування, за так звану фільтрацію і депортацію наших людей, за мародерство. Усі ці нелюди обов'язково відповідатимуть. Але ми маємо пам'ятати, що коли зло набуває таких масштабів, мовчання людей наближається до рівня співучасті, а відмова від реальної боротьби зі злом стає допомогою саме йому. Тому, якщо у вас громадянство Росії і ви мовчите, значить ви не боретесь, а значить цим ви підтримуєте. І де ви не знаходились, як на території Росії, так і за кордоном, ваш голос повинен звучати на підтримку України, а значить проти цієї війни. Найближчим часом Верховній Раді України належить ухвалити рішення про продовження воєнного стану і загальної мобілізації. Очевидне рішення, очевидні причини. Україна завжди прагнула і прагне миру. І багато разів у різних переговорних форматах пропонувала російському керівництву закінчити війну, звільнити українську землю від окупації. Але поки що Росія вірить у терор, перебуває в полоні своїх пропагандистських ілюзій. І досі сподівається, що нібито зможе чогось досягти різними формами шантажу. Не зможе. А отже, ми повинні захищатися, повинні відповідати на кожен прояв терору, на всі обстріли, на жорстокі обстріли, які не припиняються жодного дня. На жаль, у нас є втрати, але ми повинні боротися на всіх рівнях, на всіх фронтах, максимально посилювати нашу державу, зберігати нашу єдність і залучати ще більш країн до нашої антивоєнної коаліції. Чим сильніше буде Україна, тим слабшою буде Росія, а отже, тим менше часу триватиме ця війна. І кожен в Україні, кожен у вільному світі має робити все від них залежне і все можливе, щоб Росія і ті, хто підтримують війну, платили все більшу ціну за російський державний терор. Я дякую всім нашим захисникам і захисницям. Я дякую всім українцям, усім, хто тримається, хто допомагає іншим, хто вірить у перемогу і наближає її своїми діями, так, як може. Кожен новий день має приносити новий результат для України. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky here on day 172 of the news. And that rounds out our news for the entire week. We're about to be moving into the question segment. The stream is not quite over yet. It'll probably be going on for another 40 minutes or so. But I do thank you all so much for watching this week. It has been an incredible week with the news that we have covered. And of course, we have enjoyed every single one of y'all in the Leaf Spring Army being here, helping us to support these fundraisers, and also paying attention to this war and continuing to keep y'all's attention and y'all's focus on this most important conflict that will decide the future of all of Europe. So with that in mind, thank you all so much once again, and we're now going to be moving on into the question segment once more. And so I'm going to let Matthew take over and talk about the polls that he always puts up, which are pretty interesting, and also the fundraiser and some of our top donors in between the last question segment and this one. And so, take it away, Matthew.
All right, folks, and first up, I'm actually going to address the fundraiser. We're currently sitting at $8,500 on the fundraiser, and our goal was only $5,000. So the enforcer kind of set a sort of unspoken goal of about 10,000. I'm not sure if we'll reach it, but 8,500 is tremendous. And also big shout out to Ed Reusser for putting in a $100 donation to the fundraiser. But once again, thank you to everybody for your generosity. And enforcer, do you have anything that you want to add?
I would, of course, like to thank all of y'all so much once again for y'all's generosity. It is unbelievable to think that even this late into the war, we're able to raise these kinds of funds weekly to help out nonprofits in Ukraine, and it's impressive to me every single time that most of the people in the Leaf Spring Army who have been here since the start continue to help us support Ukraine and keep it going. And so with that, thank you to everyone so much once again for the support that y'all put into this fundraiser, because it is honestly just incredible at this point, and it's unbelievable to me. And so with that, we're now going to move into the poll that Matthew's thrown up, and we're going to see a little bit about it.
And actually, real quick, I'm going to give a shout out to Mycroft for putting in a $100 donation, Malachite for putting in a $50, Benjamin Rude for also putting in a $50, and Ed Reusser, who just put in that $100, also put in another $50. So thank you very much to all of your support of the fundraiser, and it is going directly to help out those in Ukraine. So now moving on to the poll. This was one of those sort of philosophical polls, and the question was: if you were the president of Ukraine, would you use banned weapons against the Russians if necessary? And that's very important to remember: if necessary, meaning if it came down to winning or losing the war. 28% of you said yes. War must be won at all costs. Oh, whoa.
Oh my
real
gosh.
Quick, David Rockin put in a 500 Canadian donation. I got to stop talking about the poll for a minute to recognize that.
And thank you, David Rockin, for the massive amount of support. You've gotten us up to $9.1 thousand. We've just passed the $9,000 mark, and we are $900 away from $10,000. And also, David Rockin just said over 9,000, and that is a classic meme. And so with that, we're now going to get back to the poll, but I, of course, wanted to make sure that we said thank you so much for that massive amount of support.
All right, so back to the poll. Would you use banned weapons against the Russians if necessary? 28% said yes, war must be won at all costs. 35% said maybe, last resort only, and 36% said no, the rules of war cannot be violated. Now, me personally, this may be controversial. However, I think it would be the right answer in my opinion. If it came down to the Ukrainians losing the war and they had the option of either using a banned weapon or not, me personally, I would say maybe last resort only. I would probably use a banned weapon if it meant not losing the war, just because you cannot allow evil to overcome good. Even if it means having to get in the gutter for a moment, the Ukrainians can't win. It's their country. They have the right to keep it, and they've been wrongfully invaded, and they have a right to defend it.
And in my opinion, I would have to agree. It would be something of a I would actually have to kind of fall into the yes category. While that's the smallest portion here, if necessary is kind of the underlying principle here, not as a normal, day-to-day war occurrence kind of thing where you're dropping incendiaries and napalm on Russian soldiers. But if the war started to turn in a way where Western support began to dry up and the Ukrainians looked like they were going to be on their own again against the Russians, and the Russians could somehow continue to keep the war going and maybe grind the Ukrainians down, I would have to say then I think that the Ukrainians would have to pretty much resort to using those kinds of weapons, because what in the world is the world going to do at that point to Ukraine? They would have stopped supporting them at that point. The Ukrainian economy would just be existing however it is, along with the Russian one, and so in my opinion, eye for an eye kind of stuff, might as well just start using what the Russians are using on them in kind at that point. And so with that, I hope that does address my opinion. And once again, everyone is entitled to their opinion. I know someone's about to act like their existence depends on me agreeing with them, because we have people around a very small amount like that. And one thing I have to say is that just because I disagree with you does not mean that you're about to evaporate into nothing. And just because you disagree with me does not mean I have to go and try and change your line of thinking. It's a free country, and you're pretty much allowed to think however you want. Of course, we do make some rules on this live chat, because this isn't the United States, this is the Enforcer channel, but still, you can believe whatever you want, and I'm not going to stop you. So y'all all have valid points, but that's kind of where I stand on this one right now. And so with that, now that we've covered the poll, we're now going to be moving into our question segment. And also, just to let y'all know, we are going to have a set time where the stream will end tonight. We're going to be ending the stream at around 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. And so with that, we are on to the first question of this last question segment.
All right, and the first one is from What Else Happened, who says, how is the Russian government covering up the tremendous loss of life among the troops?
They cover it up usually by not collecting bodies, from what we can tell. They usually leave bodies behind so that way there's no confirmed record that those soldiers have been killed in action. Instead, they end up being missing in action, which, according to the Russian pension system of what they pay out to families, if they're missing in action, families do not get paid. If they're killed in action, they do get paid. And so they just really leave a lot of them behind and let the Ukrainians sort out what to do with the bodies. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, at least as far as I know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Mark Williams, who says, why is Russia advancing despite all the weapons received by Ukraine? I feel like this war helps Russia to study the usefulness of the Western weapons and their fighting tactics.
I don't really feel like it's helping the Russians out at all, because if they're studying, how come they aren't evolving? That's kind of a good point to stick out, because if the Russians are such brainiacs, why haven't they found out over around 6 to 7 months of fighting how Western strategy and tactics work and how to get around it and create a better strategy that could combat Western doctrine? They haven't figured that out yet, and so that tells me that this isn't really them trying to probe, and also, that's a poor reason to start a war. If your whole entire reason to start is, let me see how Western doctrine actually pairs up against ours, you could just have spies planted into the Pentagon, or the U.S. military for that matter, that pretty much lived in the U.S. their whole lives, report back to Russia how Western doctrine actually works, and then you can pretty much tack together a war game, and then take Western doctrine and immediately pit it up against Russian doctrine and see how the two play out and who would come out on top. That would be a better way to do something like that. And I know that someone is about to say, oh my god, you don't play video games to find out who wins in a war. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's why it's called a Kriegspiel, and that's something that's been going on for hundreds of years. And that's how the Germans were so good at their lightning fast strategies in World War II, is because in between World War I and World War II, the German high command literally just played games, massive board games that simulated how a real war would turn out, and that's how they found out that the lightning fast breakthrough strategy of a blitzkrieg was deadly effective against most militaries and their doctrines at the time. And if the Russians wanted to learn about Western doctrine and strategy and how that would pair up against theirs, they could just do something like that without having to throw away their entire economy, their manpower, and their resources. Also, the other thing is that the Ukrainians are getting Western weapons, and they aren't losing any ground to really speak of. We did adjust the front lines tonight, but as far as we know, the front lines may have been like that for about 3 weeks or a month at this point, and we finally just got enough information to be able to adjust them accordingly. So we don't really see the Russians making any ground anywhere of note, and it seems by and large that from what we've been able to hear, the Ukrainians are taking back villages in the Izium area. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I'm able to. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Bird Awalt, who says, Enforcer, why is you all avoiding mention of the big Sapsan, the truck-mounted Grim system, which was developed by Ukraine's Dnipro-based Yuzmesh Aerospace in Russian Crimean airbase attack?
The train? Why is you all...
Let's see. Let me see what he said here real quick. Let's see. He said, hold on, I just lost it. Let's see. Where was it? Here we go. Mention of the big Sapsan, the truck-mounted Grim system. So it looks like a Sapsan is a train.
Sapsan missile, maybe? Sapsan missile system. Like you won. We've actually talked about this specific vehicle before. When we looked at the FRIM, we said that must be the carrier of the missile itself. So we have talked about that. So I hope that addresses the comment. And also, another thing I noticed, Matthew, about the Sapsan is great, glorious Russian technology matched with the industrial capacity to do the unbelievable. This looks a lot like an Ice 3. I don't know about you, but let me pull that up real quick. Ice 3 high-speed train. This is a spitting image. It almost looks like a direct copy, a license-built variant of... Yeah, it's the same.
Oddly similar.
It is the exact same. And so the Russians can't even come up with a design of high-speed train. And I think these may just actually be bought from Germany. Let me read that real quick. The train is a Siemens Valero model, which is used by Germany's Deutschbahn in the ICE high-speed train system, which in turn is based on the ICE 3, which I was correct. And for Deutschbahn, known as the Siemens Valero Russ. The trains start regular service in December 2009 at a max speed of 155 miles per hour. So pretty much, the pride of the Russian railroad's high-speed fleet, the Sapsan here, is a license-built copy of the ICE 3 that's been used by the Deutschbahn for quite some time. So with that, I know that wasn't anything that anyone asked about, but I found that kind of interesting now knowing that information. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from CA Lags once again, who says, how do you think that first angry guy from the stream will react if conscripted to fight in Ukraine? And I mean, personally, I imagine his attitude is going to be a lot different. He's going to probably start acting like a coward and trying to beg for not being forced to go would be my guess.
Now, that guy was spewing all that angry talk and stuff, but if it had been that guy in the skit earlier on in the war who said, we have a list right here and we would like you to sign on it for possible contract soldiers that could enter this war, he would have turned around and started speed walking away. I promise you that. So, with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I would think how that guy would respond to something like that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Misty Curtis, who says, how many Russian ships have been destroyed since the beginning of the war?
The Ukrainians claim that about 15 of them have been destroyed, but they don't really give the discernment of size. We know that it may... Well, actually, we know that it's down to the smallest patrol boats near Snake Island and all the way up to the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva. So in total, 15, but we don't have the exact breakdown of how many of each class. We know that 4 fast attack boats were destroyed, the Moskva was destroyed, and I believe there was another frigate that may have been destroyed at a point, but I can't really remember. And so with that, we are on to the next one. I hope that answers the question at least fairly well. And so with that, to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Kay Fizzle, who says, how do you think Russia will combat the so-called brain drain as skilled Russian workers seek opportunities outside their country? And I didn't even know Russia had skilled workers.
Actually, yeah, that's pretty high regards for the Russians. They haven't really done a lot on their own. Let's actually look at that real quick. Russian inventions in the 21st century. And let's see if they've come up with anything over the past few decades of the Russian Federation's existence. Timeline of Russian innovation. Once vodka gets put on the list, I'm sure the innovation will stop for about 3 or 4 decades. So you can see that in the 14th century, they came up with a ball game. But let's skip to the 21st century. Let's get past all this. 18th century, 19th century. No, Russian Empire time. I'm going a lot. Sorry, everyone. Let's see here. We're speeding ahead to the Russian Federation. A style of realistic art was developed in the Soviet Union and became a dominant style in other socialist countries. Pretty much state-sanctioned art. And that's what it looked like. And you can see it's pure propaganda. The air ionizer. Interesting. The Budanovka. Oh my god. The ugliest hat ever. Look at that and tell me that's a good hat. That's an ugly hat. It's supposed to make them look like old Russian heroes of yore, but like these? But this just looks silly. There's no way you can make that look cool. Anyways, backing out of that and scrolling on down to the 21st century. '21st century. Here we go. Russian Federation time. The RD-180 engine, which is a rocket engine. Okay. The nucleotron. Superconductive synchrotron. Alright. Novichok. Probably the most innovative Russian invention of the past 30 years. RAR is a proprietary archive file format that supports data compression. So, pretty much just some computer coding.
Yeah, I've heard about those. Those are some troublesome files when it comes to decompressing.
The Baryev BE-200, which looks like a small private plane. Submarine-launched spacecraft. What the hell? When do they do that? The 7Z is another form of computer programming. The Sea launch. Interesting. Okay. The Florovium. Okay. Interesting. Some kind of synthetic element. Space.
Does that say space tourism? They invented that?
Yeah, sure they did. I mean, the space tourism,
really?
Like space tourism as an idea had been already come up with in the 60s in the United States about having hotels in space. So that's just a straight up lie. The Murnane.
Who's the last person to edit this Wikipedia? Is it like a Russian IP?
I think it might be. We'll have to check in a second. But look at this one, Matthew. They invented an open air mine. Oh my god, what an invention.
That's a hell of an invention right there.
They've changed the world with this. In fact, y'all may remember this mine if you played Modern Warfare 3. This was actually one of the missions. Bet y'all didn't know that. But anyways, moving on from that, superconducting nanowire single photon detector. Okay. Park Pibeti Metro Oh my god, they made escalators. Those had been around for decades before that. Moscovium. Another synthetic element. Nihonium. Another one. Graphene. Oh man.
Right.
Yeah, sure. Maybe. I don't know. NS-50 Let Pobieti is an icebreaker. Icebreakers have been around for decades.
Is that chat roulette down there?
Chat roulette. Yeah. Oh,
Chat
the cam bots! They're from Russia!
Oh, no.
We aren't clicking on that one. We can't go there because I know the pictures would probably not be suitable for YouTube, so we're not going to go there and look at that in
They
detail.
said, look, 2020, COVID-19 vaccine. Look at that. Oh my god. Some Russian came on this thing and started just putting everything they could think of on this list.
And look at what they're supposedly inventing over the 2010s. It's like nothing. Chat roulette. That's not really an invention. Tennessine, another synthetic element. Nuclear power station barge.
That's a terrible idea.
Yeah. Nord Stream, which is a pipeline. That's not new. Pipelines have been around forever. Spectre R, which is a satellite. There's a lot of satellites in orbit, just in case y'all didn't know. Ruski Island Bridge, which is just a bridge. The OCSIAL, which is a nanotechnology company, and it's the world's largest graphene nanotube manufacturer. And then the T-14 Armada, which isn't even really in existence. There's only about, 4 of these. And then the COVID-19 vaccine, which I think is a big stretch, because I think everyone kind of came up with it at about the same time around the world. And this one I mean, like, if this one, jeez, hang on. Let me see here if it actually talks about who made one first on here. Let's see. In November 2021, the full nucleotide sequences of the AstraZeneca and Pfizer BioNTech vaccines were released by the UK Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency in response to a Freedom of Information request. And so, according to here, it seems like the UK was the first one to actually have any kind of a sequence for the vaccine. Let's see. Nothing about Russia on this entire article about them making it. Planning and development. History, effectiveness. Who had the first COVID vaccine? I think a better question would be what country? What country?
And I just saw Joe Demet say in the live chat, I'll bet you they claim to invent the internet too. Probably so, but that award goes to Al Gore. We know he's the real creator of it.
And also, it was the United Kingdom that became the first country to approve a vaccine and rolled out 800,000 doses of it in the first month. So, yeah, the Russians lied. So, anyways, that's not a surprise. So, I hope that kind of answers the question about are there any smart Russians. And so I don't think there's a brain drain from Russia to really be worried about, because their inventions, what they're calling inventions, are them literally building stuff that has been around as a concept for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so we're on to the next.
And next up, we have a question from Jay Bagwell, one of our channel legends, who says, hypothetically, if you were a combat soldier in Ukraine, what weapons would you choose? You pick a rifle and a pistol. Now, me personally, I would pick a Daniel Defense rifle, DDM4, M4A1 to be precise, and my sidearm, or pistol, would be a Glock 19X.
If I had to pick weapons, I would pick, I would also probably pick an M4 as well. I'm trying to think about that, though. I'm seriously thinking about that. Because, you see, I'm also divided amongst a rifle that I know is about to get my British viewers just going all out. Oh, yeah, it's the best! The L1. I think it's a neat rifle. It still stands up in modern times. It's long. It's an incredibly long rifle. But it uses a 308 kind of round. It's a 7.62x5.1 NATO round. And I like it. I just think it's a nice gun. I haven't gotten one. Maybe someday I will get one. They're incredibly expensive, though. They're like $2,000. But I always thought they were really cool. And I would probably get an L1. And as my sidearm, I would get a 1911. I still think it's a great pistol. It stands up to the modern age. And it shoots 45 caliber, which I just think is a nice round. I like how it handles. And so with that, I hope that answers your question. And we're on to the next one.
All right. Let's see here. I'm putting a poll up real quick. There we go. And up next, we have a question from Kurt, who says, would you, an enforcer, ever visit Ukraine while the war is still going on?
I don't know. I mean, like, it's a pretty interesting question. I don't think we would, because if we did, we would have to do a lot of stuff. These streams would have to change in their schedule altogether. And the thing about constant streams is that they have to happen at a constant time. And so if we change when the streams happen altogether, our entire viewer base would not be able to watch. So we most likely wouldn't do it for that reason. And on top of that, if we were over there, our sole purpose of being there would be to make films and videos on the war. And then we would have to travel around a lot, probably wouldn't have time to make the streams. And then everything would go topsy-turvy. And so I don't think we would for those reasons, but still at the same time, I'm not ruling it out, because it seems like this war will be going on for a while, and we could be like everyone else and say we are in Ukraine and hang out in Lviv the entire war. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Mark Thompson for putting in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. Mark, you put us up to $9,454 on the fundraiser. So thank you very much for your generosity. And up next, we have a question from Kim Anderson, who says, what was Zelensky alluding to when he warned people about mouthing off?
I'm not exactly sure. He could just be telling people not to spread misinformation or not to say things against the government, because if you say things against the government in war, yeah, kind of put on a list. It doesn't matter what country you're in. If the United States was in World War II and you said something like, "Gee, I really like what the Germans are doing," you're going to be put on a watch list by the FBI. That's just how it is. And also another interesting thing to me about something I had to do in college is that I had to watch a movie. I'm not going to talk about the political side of things here, but this is just something I noticed. It was a movie about a guy called Dalton Trumbo, and if y'all know about him, he was blacklisted pretty much in Hollywood during the McCarthy era, I guess you could say. And what was interesting to me is that the movie, and also Dalton Trumbo in real life, made no qualms about publicly saying they were a member of the Communist Party. And then in the movie, they made it out to be, although they clearly made him say in the movie that he was a card-carrying communist, that he was wrongfully claimed to be a communist. And I was like, well, if McCarthy was going after communists, not saying what he did was right, he ruined a lot of normal people's lives that weren't communists. Still, in that specific instance, I was like, you picked the worst person to make that case, because the guy literally was a communist, and you could even go and read news article publishings at the time where it was like, yes, I used my sway as one of the highest paid writers in Hollywood to make sure that anti-communist movies were not made in the late 40s. So I was like, interesting. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next question. I hope we answered that one at least a little.
And next up, big shout out to Dutch R. Jen for putting in a $100 donation on the fundraiser. We are slowly creeping up to that $10,000 figure and currently sit at $9,554. So, also to clarify the poll, because I saw people were getting confused about what I meant, when I said, would you rather have Enforcer Matt or the Enforcer's loadout, I meant, would you like our rifle and pistol selection? So I personally chose a Daniel Defense rifle and a Glock pistol. And Enforcer, what did you pick?
I picked an L1A1 and a 1911, which I already know is probably going to be the more unpopular pick of the two.
Yes, and that is just to clarify that poll just a little bit. Hopefully that helps. But up next, we have a question from Ian Frogfish, who says, if World War III broke out, I don't think it will personally, and you were conscripted, which nation's tank would you prefer to be forced to crew and why? I.e., any Western and NATO countries, etc. So, Ian, me personally, I would be forced to crew an American tank because we actually have a legal obligation because we're signed up for the selective service. And your question did say if conscripted, so we would have to be on the American side, and I would choose to be as well.
And I'd also choose to be on the American side, and I would gladly hop in an M1A2 Abrams. And so I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one. And also, William Allen just threw in a $100 donation to the fundraiser, along with Dubia, who threw in $20, which brings us up to 9.6 thousand. And in the next 15 minutes, it may be possible for us to get to 10,000. I'm not entirely sure, but fingers crossed. With that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Nick Poole, who says, Enforcer, when do you believe Ukraine will truly be forcing Russia out of Ukraine? And what will it take? Any kind of particular aid or weapons that would be needed? And if so, what kind?
The Ukrainians will push the Russians out of the country with time and patience. You can throw in a massive amount of weapons, but sometimes it just takes time. And sitting down and waiting is what the Ukrainians have to do. They have to wait for the right kind of weather. They have to wait for the right kind of year. And once they get into the fall and the winter, things will start to come together for them, most likely. I'm not saying that's a certain 100% true statement. I may be wrong, but I feel like in the fall, the Ukrainians' fortunes will start to increase massively, and they'll begin to push the Russians back out. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. We're on to the next one.
All right, and just to address that poll real quick, Enforcer Matt won. His loadout was apparently the more popular choice. But anyways, up next, we have a question from, let's see here. Brian V, who says, the Leaf Spring Army has donated more money than any streamer on YouTube that I've seen out of any fundraiser ever. You guys are amazing. Thank you. And Brian, thank you very much for the kind words. And to be honest, I'm not really sure if we have raised the most. I think one particular YouTuber, which I won't mention his name because every time we mention it, it seems like our stream gets messed up. But he donates a lot of money. I think he might have raised a little bit more.
I think he may have raised a lot more in terms of millions, actually, from what I can tell. But still, I thank you so much for the kind words. And as far as beyond him, I think we have raised the most out of everyone on YouTube. But then again, I could be wrong. I may not know about some other channels that have been out there fundraising. But as far as I can tell, we are well above everyone else that I've been trying to keep up with tabs on about what they've been raising and all. No, don't say it! No, what are y'all doing? Y'all are saying his name in the live chat. He's going to come down here. YouTube is going to come and put the no-no stick on us and shut down our stream, so don't do that. You're scaring me. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Nate L., who says, is there any information on that weapon that was used in the attack in Crimea?
Unfortunately, no. We still don't know what the exact kind of weapon that was used in Crimea. Also, I just saw Hoodoo Texas say, don't go into McCarthyism or even try to defend it in any manner. Here's what I'm saying. I'm not defending it, but I'm saying that if their goal was to go after communists, and your argument, well, your case against McCarthyism and they were going after the wrong people is that they went and blacklisted the communists, which was their entire goal, in the terms of the goals that the Red Scare was going after, in that particular instance, they did exactly what they were looking for. They went and pretty much put down a communist. That's what I'm saying. And so if you're going to make a movie about something like that, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense that in the defense of, well, in the offensive against the Red Scare and McCarthyism, you sit there and say they were not getting communists, they were getting innocent people, and then you go, well, they were getting communists. It's kind of contradictory of the goal there. Not getting political or anything, but I didn't really get why the movie would pick the actual person that the Red Scare was going for and make them out to be I don't know, but I hope you see what I'm saying there. Also, another thing that I'd like to address on that real quick is I have seen Good Night and Good Luck as well. That movie I thought was a whole lot better in explaining what was going on in the time and actually made it out to be a reasonable argument instead of going, oh, they were going after communists and there were none. Look at this communist that got shut down. Instead, it was based around the news reporters at CBS and them finally deciding that they were going to stand up to McCarthy by putting out truthful coverage on what he was doing and why it was starting to sort of tear apart the fabric of the nation. I thought that was a much better way to explain the Red Scare and what was going on in that time. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, folks, and we just have $200 more to go until we hit that $10,000 mark. So who will the lucky viewer be that throws in that $200 donation, or either several viewers that put in a $50 donation each? We just need 4 of you. We just hit 10,000, but I don't know who put in the money.
What? How in the world? We don't see the people who are throwing in the money. I don't see anyone who's thrown in any support, but we just reached $10,000. Look at that. Can we get a yeehaw? Yeah, there we go. We got a yeehaw, and we've reached $10,000. And we still got 10 minutes left on stream. And so with that, on that bombshell, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up we have there's a $100 donation from Carolyn. Let's see if there's any other ones that come in. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for that. And there has to be one more, but I don't see it right now, but I will call it out when I see it. So next up, we have that question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, how can the messaging about the war be changed to emphasize the importance of defeating Russia, defending democratic values, and defending democracies as a whole?
Unfortunately, there's no way to really explain it better, because you could only say so much on a large platform that's nation spanning or world spanning for that matter, that gets across. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't think in the terms of the game, because really this is important for the United States from our perspective strategically, for our interests in Europe and putting the Russians in a very bad position. For the United States, that's really what we're concerned about. And so when making an argument for Americans, it's in our best interest to make sure the Ukrainians win. If you're a Ukrainian, it's in your best interest to win because you'll retain your independence and your sovereignty. And you'll also retain pretty much your, I guess you could say, self-determining abilities, which would be stripped from you if the Russians took over. For the rest of Europe, it's to ensure that the Russians don't get on the borders of Poland, which will put them a lot closer to war, or may put them in a more disadvantageous position if a conventional war was to break out with the Russians. So you have to argue it from multiple different standpoints depending on where you're from. But the main point, I think, should be stated to Americans that we're supporting Ukraine, as the government is supporting Ukraine, and it's in the United States' interests as a nation.
Missed.
So yeah, missed. 1 second, sorry everyone, my phone just fell to the ground. I keep it in my lap to check on other things with the channel in the middle of the stream. But for the United States, from the U.S. perspective of our strategic concerns, it's incredibly important for us for Ukraine to join NATO, or at least be friendly to the European Union, because then, if push ever came to shove, we would be within 200 miles of Volgograd and within strangling distance of the entire Russian economy. That's kind of the whole reason that the U.S. should support Ukraine. And people these days, I don't get it. A lot of people are always thinking about, the Russians, they're attacking Ukraine because they have biolabs. Like, come on. Like, that's the fakest, as there's a million excuses out there now, but that's one of the fakest excuses I've ever heard, because no one has the technology to target a single strand of DNA that makes you a Russian and then kill you. No one's ever been able to do anything like that technologically, and so I don't know why, out of everyone, the Ukrainians would be the first to do it. That just seems nonsensical. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Jeff Stewart, who says, Ukraine has large reserves of natural gas in the Crimea and Donbass. What are your thoughts about Russian invasion of Ukraine tied to the theft of natural gas?
I think that's more of more of a coincidence than a correlation. The Russians may be looking at those natural gas reserves, but at the same time, they have massive pools of oil and natural gas within their own country to pull from, and due to them being an OPEC member, these additional oil fields don't really add a lot to their sway in that kind of field, in that energy field. So while it would add to the Russians' potential natural gas and oil reserves, I don't think it's big enough that the Russians would have started the war over that reason. Once again, I think it's entirely border and sphere of influence reasons that this war started, and the Russians are going to make sure that Ukraine stays pro-Russian aligned rather than pro-European aligned. If you'll notice, this entire conflict back in 2014 when it started began because Ukraine flipped from being friendly to the Russians under Yanukovych's presidency to being pro-European Union after the Maidan had riots, or you could call it the Revolution of Dignity, which is another word for it. And that's when all of this started. And so in that perspective, with that being the catalyst, it's entirely more for drawing up spheres of influence and who really is pulling the strings to Ukraine, more so than the resources attached to it. That's in my opinion, though. I could be wrong, and it could be for that reason, but that's kind of the stuff I'm looking at right now to make me come up with that assessment. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Data Relay, who says, considering all the support Ukraine continues to receive, will they need to join NATO for their future survival? And Data Relay, real quick, before the Enforcer answers that question, I think it'd be very wise of them to join NATO. However, I'm not sure when they'll get the chance to do it, because right now, if Ukraine were to join NATO, we'd basically be starting World War III. And also, depending on how the war goes in the end, hopefully Ukraine wins, but that would have to be the time when they decide whether or not they're going to get into NATO and whether or not NATO is going to allow them in.
And with that, I would think that it's probably beneficial in the future for Ukraine to join NATO. Not now, considering that there is a war going on, and if they join NATO at this very moment, it would immediately invoke Article 5, and so we would be going into war. So I think that they should join it later, and it would be beneficial to the survival. But at the same time, they could also get along just fine, ending up being neutral. Notice that the Swedes and the Finns remain neutral through both World War I, World War II, and the Cold War, and they both ended up turning out pretty okay. And so if the Ukrainians had to pick that route, they wouldn't be too bad doing that either. But going in the pro-Russian route is the worst direction, because there's no room for economic growth or prosperity going down that path. Also, real quick, I saw someone say that Russia is not a member of OPEC. And we can see here that there are 13 member states. The current OPEC members are Algeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Republic of Congo, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Venezuela, Ecuador, Indonesia, and Qatar are former. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, these four are former. These are the current ones. So apparently, based off of this map, OPEC, they're a part of OPEC Plus, which is the streaming service for OPEC. You can get it at $20 a month, apparently. So
the oil cartel.
The oil cartel, the sweet, sweet oil cartel. Neat oil fires in Kuwait. Those were fun. So yes, you are right. Russia is not a direct member of OPEC, but they are a part of their streaming service called OPEC Plus. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you for correcting that for me. I'm sure that someone's about to say, "Oh, the enforcer acts like he knows it all." And I just want to make it clear, we just corrected that on stream. So, just letting you know. We're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Ram Anno, who says, "Enforcer, if Ukraine is attacked by Belarus, would Poland or any other country get directly involved, but not NATO as organization?" And actually, I think Poland is a member of NATO.
Yes, Poland is a member state of NATO, and so they would not get involved because the Belarusians attacking Ukraine would be the same as Russia attacking Ukraine. It does not invoke Article 5 for any kind of actions to be taken. And also, if Poland gets involved in the war and then Belarus and Russia start firing cruise missiles into Poland, that could technically invoke Article 5. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Wayne's World of Science and Technology, who says, "Enforcer, did you hear the incorrect report about Igor Girkin being arrested? He's still posting on Telegram."
I have not heard about that, and unfortunately, I have to be honest with you, I don't know who Igor Girkin is. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that question.
And next up, we have a question from S. Stefano, who says, "How likely do you think it is for Putin to use nukes if Ukraine liberates Kherson, Melitopol, and other Ukrainian cities?"
Can you reread that one real quick?
Yes, he said, "How likely do you think it is for Putin to use nukes if Ukraine liberates Kherson, Melitopol, and other cities?"
I don't think he would use nukes under any situation because that's a lose-lose game for the Russians. I would go through the massive explanation as to why, but we have done that, I think, about 100 times on this channel at this point, and I can just trust me, bro, on this one. It would not go well for the Russians if they did something like that because the rest of the world would get involved almost immediately. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that lucky last viewer that throws in that lucky last question of the night is David Bryan, who says, "Can we give Ukraine any more weapons that can pave the way for Ukraine to counterattack more effectively? And if so, what weapons would that be primarily?"
Davy Crockett's. Do you know what the Davy Crockett is, Matthew?
A fellow that was exploring.
Well, also, it's a small tactical nuclear weapon that the United States developed in the 50s, which you could use in frontline service. You could fire this thing.
Oh, that looks like a mini nuke.
Yeah, that's probably where Fallout got the inspiration to make the mini nuke, is from the Davy Crockett. But it's a pretty interesting little weapon. We can even see the little feller one out there. I don't know what's special about that. But anyways, with that, in all seriousness, getting past the joke there, I think that the best next weapon we could send them would be F-15Es, so that way they could be multi-role aircraft that could both conduct ground strikes and also air support missions, because that would help out the Ukrainians a lot. While the Ukrainians have mastered the realm of artillery and counterfire, they need to now master the realm of air power, because while they own the skies, they don't really well, they control the skies, but they don't really own them, I guess is the best way to say it, because they're not able to utilize the full power of controlling the skies like they would if they were to have actual close air support aircraft that had far more modern munitions that could be used on them. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. It's been an
Enforcer, real quick, we have to round out this last poll, probably the shortest one we've ever run. And the question was, do you think Putin would ever use nukes against Ukraine? 58% said no, and 42% said yes. And very quickly, I would fall within the 42%. I think Putin would use nukes before he accepts defeat.
I would have to fall within the 58% actually that say no, because I just don't think that the Russians would use nukes. While Putin is crazy and it does throw a little bit of uncertainty in, nukes being used it just seems unlikely to me. But then again, I could be wrong. So with that, I hope we both were able to address that poll fairly well. And like I was saying earlier, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. We've raised a whopping $10,000, which put us well over $400,000 total raised on every single fundraiser that we've ever done before. I thank you all so much for coming tonight. It's been incredible to cover the news, see the fundraiser blow up, and also to answer so many questions and just have an interesting time covering this news with the rest of y'all. I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are going to enjoy our day off tomorrow and sit back and relax. I'm probably going to begin writing a script for one of our upcoming videos tomorrow, and also just to let y'all know, since y'all are dedicated Elite Spring Army people here, since there's 4,400 of y'all left 2 hours and 30 minutes in, I am actually taking recommendations. Do not DM me directly, though. No, I'll make an exception on this one instance. Like don't send like a massive essay or anything. Just send a single idea, a niche. It could be anything. It could be niche, like how are seamless steel pipes made, or anything like that. It could be, well, how does the North Korean economy work? Are North Koreans a viable country? Why is the North Korean GDP so low? I know I'm talking about North Korea a lot, but I'll take video ideas because I'm looking at making a new video, and I'm open to anything as long as it's interesting to me. So with that, thank you all once again so much for watching, and I'll see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all so much once again, and have a great night.